This kind of a problem has you solve for a specified variable. You're usually given a real formula from one of the branches of science, and your goal is to move things around until you can isolate the specified variable that you're supposed to look for. So let's take a formula from out of physics. Since it's a real formula, all of these variables actually stand for something. F stands for force, g is the gravitational constant, m1 is the mass of object 1, m2 is the mass of object 2, and d squared is the distance squared between the two masses. Knowing what the variables mean will matter later when you take physics. You're being shown how to do this now, because in a later physics class, you might have to solve for mass 1, or mass 2, or the distance, or gravity. This time we'll solve for gravity. So we have to reverse everything that's attached to g. You'll notice that masses 1 and 2 are being multiplied to g, and that g is being divided by d squared. We have to reverse all of this on both sides of the equation. The easiest way to start will be to multiply both sides by d squared. Now when you do that, d squared will be on the left side, but on the right side, it's going to cancel out with the 1 on the bottom. That's because the d squared is really over 1. And so ignoring everything else, if you just had d squared over a 1, and if you just pretend that all of this was just 1 over d squared, the d squareds actually cancel each other out. When they're the exact same on the top and the bottom, you can cancel them out at that point. So right over here, this d squared is going to cancel out with that d squared. And so on the next line, you're going to have f, and we'll put the d squared after the f. And on this side, the d squareds are gone. So all you have is g, m1, and m2. It's all over 1, but you don't really need to put the 1. This is more of a placeholder, and it's understood. So now the next thing to do, and you can do this next part in one step. Notice both m1 and m2 are being multiplied to g. So all you have to do is divide both sides by m1 and m2. You could do it one at a time. You could do this, and then you'd have f times d squared over m1 equals g and m2. And then after that, you divide both sides by m2. And you'd end up with this, f times d squared over m1 times m2 in the denominator. And on the right, you'd have a g. That's because the m1's canceled up there and the m2's canceled here. Just like up here, where if you have the same thing on the top and the bottom, they cancel each other out. So you could do it this way. A faster way would be to look at everything that's being multiplied to the g, and then just divide both sides by that. So you divide both sides by this in the same step. So on the right, you'd be dividing by m1 and m2 at the same time. And what you do on the right side of the equation, you have to do on the left. So notice you've got an m1 on the top and an m1 on the bottom, so they cancel out here. And here you've got an m2 on the top and an m2 on the bottom, so these also cancel out. So the next thing is that you've got f times d squared over m1 and m2, and all of that equals g. At this point, you could just rearrange it. You're just having them switch sides. So the g will be on the left, and everything else will be on the right. And this way you've solved for g. And that would be your answer. We'll look at more examples in upcoming videos. Leave a comment below. Subscribing is free. Click the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons for more videos.